A major new immigration bill, the Laken Riley Act, has passed the House and is now in the Senate. As written, it has major due process implications, as well as making the question, who is in charge of our immigration policy, the states or the federal, more complicated to answer. My name is Dina Sayegh Doll with the Legal AF channel. Let's break this down. Now, as we know, the Republican state attorney generals, Republican governors have been trying to influence and change and be in control of immigration policy for years. Texas passed SB 4, which was a state law making it illegal to cross into Texas. And the problem is that the federal government is in charge of our immigration policy, in charge of our immigration laws. And so federal law supersedes state law. This, however, this SB 4 has been tied up in the court for years, trying to get to the Supreme Court to essentially reaffirm that, or in this case with the MAGA conservatives, upend that and allowing states to have their own immigration laws, which, as you can see, would be chaos. It would be chaos for California to have one set of immigration laws and then Arizona right next to it to have another set and Texas to have another set. Obviously, there is a purpose behind the federal government having one immigration policy and laws that will apply to every border state. But Republicans have been making this an issue for quite a long time. They made it a central issue to our elections. And perhaps that's why so many Democratic House representatives voted for the bill, which allowed it to go on to the Senate. And so one of the things, there's a few things that if it passes, again, without amendments, it's possible there may be amendments to improve this bill. But if it passes as is, it has some major changes to how we govern our laws, not just with immigration. So it has a provision that says that if you are undocumented and you have been arrested for a petty theft, you can be held by the federal government in a detention center and deported. And if you notice there, the difference is convicted of the crime versus arrested, and this idea that you can have detention. Anybody that comes to our country and commits a crime and is in our justice system is all afforded the same rights as the defendant. We do not treat visitors who commit crimes in our land differently than everybody else. We have one system of justice. So this upends that by applying this detention to even just an arrest, regardless if the person has been convicted or even regardless if they're released. And it applies even to minors. So this in itself could have some major due process violations. But I want to even get into more this states' rights versus federal rights, because we have seen over the years this Republican attorney generals and states wanting to take control of the immigration, not only in Texas, but there was a lawsuit that went all the way up to the Supreme Court where they were trying to dictate which immigrants under the Bush administration policy which should have priority over deportation. And the Supreme Court, and this was just in 2023, the Supreme Court said that the states don't have the right to challenge that because this is a federal policy, federal law. States don't have a right to challenge the Bush administration's decisions over deportation. That wasn't that long ago. This new law gives state attorney generals the right to sue the federal government if they fail to deport an immigrant and it causes them more than $100 of harm. $100, very small. So we would expect an avalanche of lawsuits from Republican state attorney generals when a Democrat is next in office. And if they're just unhappy about anything that the federal government is doing, this is giving those state attorney generals much more right to control and influence immigration policy. But the problem is how it's written isn't giving the flip side more control. It's not giving the state attorney generals in Democratic leaning areas more control and influence over the immigration policy. It's not suing them for overreach of deportation or immigration. It's only suing them if they're not doing enough. So it's benefiting only the the Republican state attorney generals, not the Democrat state attorney generals. And as we know, and we've been talking about on this channel, it is going to be the state attorney generals who sue the Trump administration to try to stop some of the deportation plans that they plan on doing. And so this new Laken Riley Act would give more power to the Republican state attorney generals if they don't like a Democrat's president's policy, but not give the same amount of power to a Democrat state attorney general who doesn't like the Trump administration's policy. And the Senator Coons tried to introduce an amendment to take that away, him arguing that this is going to be take a huge amount of resources for the federal government to combat all these lawsuits. Again, the harm only has to be $100. And you can imagine there's going to be a lot of Republican state attorney generals trying to make a name for themselves, will be more than happy to sue the next Democratic president, regardless of the effort they are actually making for immigration policy. So these are the things to look out for when it comes out of the Senate. Are they going to be able to amend this? And if not, I imagine that there will be a lawsuit trying to stop that provision and hopefully going up to the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court is going to have the SB4 question of whether or not the state can enact their own law, even though if there's a federal law superseding it. And then this question of whether or not the state attorney generals can sue the federal government, even though the federal government is supposed to be in charge of our immigration policy. So the Supreme Court, with this MAGA court, not a lot of confidence that they will do what is necessary to protect our immigrants. Certainly not a lot of confidence around that. But they traditionally cared about states' rights. So that could also make it even worse because maybe they do want the states to have more control over the federal immigration and policy. But the kind of chaos that would actually create would be multiple states trying to create their own mini immigration policy, how that would deal with foreign relations from the federal government and just enactment. Could it be that depending on which state you cross into, you're going to get a whole other set of rules? So this is where we're at with the current discussion of the Laken Riley Act. We will continue to update you here on the Legal AF channel on all the breaking legal news, so we can find out together how these laws are going to impact us, and especially with the Supreme Court. Popok and I have a weekly show called Unprecedented where we just focus on the Supreme Court. So this issue of how this bill will be, how it will play out with the Supreme Court, we will definitely keep you updated on that show as well.
In collaboration with the Midas Touch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories at the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.